So I just got off a boat that's been on the most amazing Arctic expedition that I could ever imagine. So I met these guys, Rhys and Niamh, in the Med a few years ago and helped them fix up their boat for their Atlantic crossing. Now, these guys have got such a story. They took a steel Copeman's boat, which was in absolute total disrepair. Well, actually, it wasn't even a boat, it was just a hull that they bought. They managed to build this boat, take it around the Atlantic and over to Greenland, and I just want to tell you their story. So, I hope you enjoy it.
Is it mad, or is it just different, you know? You're completely on your own. There's no one to help you, like. It's about risk, isn't it? I mean, yeah, the risk was high, but in my late 20s, you know, you haven't got far to fall there, have you? I had nothing anyway. Do you want me to start right from zero? It took nearly 3.5 years. I bought a bare hull. You know, it had nothing. So I'm Rhys. The last 7 years, my wife and I have built this hull into an expedition boat, and we've taken it on an Atlantic circuit, North Atlantic circuit, from Ireland all the way down to the Mediterranean and across the ocean to the Caribbean, up the east coast of America, past Canada, up to Greenland, Iceland, back to Scotland, and then this way. It took nearly 3.5 years. I bought a bare hull. You know, it had nothing. It had an engine, but it wasn't fitted. It was just sitting there in a mounts, and there was an old mast on the boat that was it wasn't in usable condition, really. It was way too big for the boat anyway. So we took what we had, and we spent 8 months in that boatyard. And we took the engine and we took the rig that we had, and we sailed it to Kinsale, which is 50 miles from where I bought the boat. You say form over function, or function over form. It was all about getting the boat moving and sailing. I have not really got a lot of interest in polished, clean, very perfect boats. As long as it's, you know, obviously clean, as in, you know, you can live on it and be nice and comfortable. But I had absolutely no interest in polishing things, or I had no interest in touching things up, making it all perfect. This boat was designed to go north and to have it, you know, be in difficult conditions and be rubbed up against walls. And, you know, in the end in Greenland, we just gave up on fenders. You spend all night moving fenders, we gave up on them. And we just let the boat lean against tires. And there were boats with us that were polished and perfect, beautiful boats, but I was happier to be not polished, you know? So that's just, you know, I always say she's like a Land Rover in that she's meant for mud plugging and having fun. So I live in Ireland. I've lived here since I was 4 years old. And growing up, I always had an idea of doing some kind of traveling, and no idea really what I wanted to do. I just knew that something had to change, or something had to happen, something a little bit different. And we have a reasonably big sailing community, but it's all racing, and the cruiser community is quite small. So there's not a lot of people, you know, building out hulls or building out boats. It doesn't happen. So yeah, we had a lot of people locally that probably didn't think it was a good idea or didn't believe in it. A lot of people who did as well, which is what I focused on. I just kind of ignored, you know, any negative advice was basically ignored, and we just kept going until it was done, you know, bit by bit. Me and Niamh decided that we would go south because it's the easier run, and it's more comfortable and warmer, and you know. And I didn't really have much experience before we did this. You know, I did an Atlantic crossing with a friend of mine, east to west, but I wasn't the captain, so I just sat on the boat and did what he told me. You know, and that's great. It's a really good way to get started. And I'm in the Ocean Cruising Club, and they have specific WhatsApp groups for sections of the world. And there was one for the Viking route and Greenland, Iceland. There was one for that area. I just bounced some, you know, do you think this is possible with the boat that I have, with the, you know, the time I have and everything? And they were all super supportive with me and really helpful information, you know. And all we really needed to do to the boat before we went up was add fuel, a fuel tank for the heater, and put on a radar. And that was it. once I decided we were going, we were gone. That was, and we just went, and we kept going, and we just got to Greenland, and it's all a blur now. It sounds easy, but getting to the start point was probably the hardest part. It was a proper expedition, We were going up fjords that we didn't have charts for, at least. Navionics charts were 100 meters wrong in a lot of places. So we're going up charting, making our own charts, and oh, that looks like a cool river, let's go find some fish up there, and that looks like a cool waterfall, let's see if we can get to it. And that was great fun. Just that kind of dump the boat somewhere and go and hack our way through and find cool trails, and that was probably the coolest part, Timing our arrival was quite difficult because we knew there was a very huge depression coming. It was forecasting 80 knots, and we were in its path. If we were there for 12 more hours, it would have got us. So trying to time getting in before that, but after dark, so when the sun came up, because going through the ice field in the dark, it's not happening, not with the experience that I have anyway. We knew that the ice cleared because the charts, said so, but there were growlers everywhere. They say growlers, they're small bits of ice, and sometimes they're invisible because they're so clean, the water's so clear, the ice, and they don't show up on radar either, and big ice. There was no pack ice. But still, for our first time, we were very nervous about what would happen and how we would deal with that. So we managed to slow the boat down, and luckily the forecast kind of settled and got a bit later, so we missed the bad weather. So we slowed right down, and the sun came up, but it may as well have not have come up because couldn't see 100 meters in front of you, So we said, okay, look, we just have to go because we're not going to get in today if we don't push on. So we pushed on, and the fog was just horrendous, and the growlers half the size of the boat and bigger, kind of coming out of the mist, and you're trying to steer away from them, and you're under sail as well, and you freeze. We were standing on the back, me and Luke, with a cup of tea, and Mark was down below on the radar. Me and Luke were just trying not to think about how cold we were. Your nose is getting sore from the cold, and you've got hats and gloves, and so we came into the ice field, and it was fine. We dealt with it. I was very nervous for probably obvious reasons. And about 3 hours later, we were both a bit knackered on the back. And all of a sudden you can start seeing the blue sky, around you, little bit by bit. And then all of a sudden fog was gone. And in the distance were just mountains of ice everywhere, floating around. They were as big as a small country, some of these. They were everywhere. And they spit the growlers off, but it was felt like coming through a cupboard to Narnia. We came into this mist and came out of the mist into a completely different world. It's just holy shit, we've arrived into 30-something countries, right? Different countries, and it's always a nice experience. You get the smell, and this was just wild, the ice and everything. You dream about it, what it's going to look like and how you're going to feel when you see it. And when you see it, it's oh my God. All of the previous suffering that you've gone through to get here doesn't mean anything when you get there. And it never stopped being interesting. I loved it. The ice was just mind-blowing. Yeah, the biggest things to navigate up in the higher latitudes, especially around ice. So only very big icebergs show up on radar. So yeah, that was one of our biggest concerns was coming into Greenland, was hitting something like that. We hit one or two small ones that you can't see them all. You're not going to avoid them all. So we hit one or two and make an awful bang, and then, it is what it is. You might get a scratch, I haven't checked. I think if you're more experienced, they're probably not a big deal. We haven't seen any pack ice, so that's probably one of the next things we're going to experience when we go further north next time. But for the most part, yeah, the small ice and bits like that. And the other thing as well is strong winds out of nowhere. You could check the forecast one day and the next day it's showing 50, 60 knots. And the wind comes down these fjords like no one else's business, You look on charts all these way up these fjords and you think we're protected from everything up there. But the wind funnels down those fjords and it brings growlers and icebergs with it, and then you get a chop, and it can get quite nasty in there. We were quite lucky that we didn't experience much of that. We had 3 days, it was blowing a consistent 50 knots, or 40 to 50 knots in one of the harbours that isn't very well protected. So the boat was being picked up and thrown against the wall for 2 days. You know, I was worried about the rig, but that was about it. And the fenders, we popped 2 fenders. I mean, and we broke 2 mooring lines. So yeah, finding protection from really nasty weather, there's no one to help you. Like, there's lads in small fishing boats everywhere. They'll help you. They'll do their best. They're the kindest people in the world. But you go up there and you're exposed. You're more exposed than probably anywhere else. I feel a very strong sense of accomplishment now that it's, when we started the project and when we bought the hull, I didn't even think I'd get it in the water. We got it in the water 8 months later, right? It wasn't by any means even close to finished. It was 3 years later before we finished it. Then I said, okay, that's done. Next step, get the boat here to the marina. Okay, that's done. And always in the back of my head, nervous, am I ever actually going to manage this? Am I ever actually going to get abroad on the boat? Am I going to get anywhere on it? I just wanted to get abroad and just have that done. And it just kept happening. Each step, you get to the Canaries, you're like, okay, I've got to cross the Atlantic. Okay, that's done. Now I've got to get up here, then I've got to get here. And then by the time that we got to Canada and the boat was ready, it was just the next step. So it wasn't as big of a mountain to climb as it would have been from the start, if that makes sense, you know? It's like, how do you eat an elephant, you know? One bit at a time. I just took every single step as it came. And remember that you're not in charge when you're out there. You're in charge of what's going on the boat, but like, if a wave decides to come over the top of you and knock you down, tough shit, you know, deal with it. That's all you can do. Like.